They called it the Great Galactic War. Spanning over 37 star systems, it raged on with a fury unmatched in modern history. The Keldrathi Dominion, a conquering empire of reptilian aristocrats, sought to absorb every known species under their singular banner. Opposing them, the Coalition of Free Species, an alliance formed in desperation, scraped together fleets and soldiers in a bid to slow the inevitable. The war had lasted 23 years. Over 200 billion lives had been lost. Yet one planet remained curiously uninvolved: Earth. Repeated attempts were made to draw humanity into the conflict. Envoys, transmissions, trade incentives, even thinly veiled threats. Earth declined each time. Not rudely, not arrogantly, just firmly. Earth claimed it had nothing to contribute, that its species was young, that it valued neutrality. "Our skies are ours," the global statement had read. "Our conflicts are our own." Some alien diplomats respected it. Most saw it as cowardice. In the galactic political sphere, Earth was a backwater curiosity. Technologically inconsistent, historically volatile, barely cohesive. A species that had only recently solved global food distribution, yet already launched deep space AI probes. Primitive and dangerous in the same breath. The Keldrathi dismissed Earth as too unpredictable to be useful, too unstable to be a threat. The coalition, needing numbers, still pressed on with invitations. All declined. In private, Earth was mocked, a wild animal pretending to be a scholar. Galactic academies taught Earth as a case study in restrained evolution. Capable, but disinterested. Dangerous, but docile. Their refusal to pick a side was viewed as moral cowardice by many, and anachronistic pacifism by others. Earth's refusal wasn't naive. It was calculated. Quietly, the Terran Union had analyzed every fleet movement, intercepted every public signal, ran simulations on every major battle. But Earth had long ago decided it would not bleed for an empire it didn't build, nor for an alliance that had once ignored its first transmissions for decades. Let the stars tear each other apart. Earth would watch. In the megacities of Earth, people still lived under skies not scarred by war. Children played with drone kites, elders debated in parks, research labs focused on medicine, not weapons. Earth had become a mystery even to itself. The ghosts of past wars, wars of ideology, resources, and survival, had carved something hard into the species. A weariness of waste. A distrust of banners. Earth did not forget its own blood-soaked soil. It had simply vowed not to spread that stain elsewhere. Still, not everyone on Earth agreed. Voices rose on secure networks, forums only accessible to high-clearance personnel. Military tacticians, veterans of Earth's own wars, asked when neutrality became surrender in disguise. Intelligence officers tracked alien movements with clinical interest, noting each battle with eerie detachment. Earth's refusal to engage wasn't born from fear. It was discipline. They hadn't been waiting to be invited to the war, they were waiting for a reason. Alien news broadcasts routinely featured Earth as a punchline. The monkey world, as one Keldrathi general called it. A species that talks big but stays behind its rock. The general laughed on livestream, declaring Earth unworthy of galactic dialogue. His battleship was later destroyed by a rival faction, but the quote remained viral. On Earth, nobody responded. But in private databases, the general's face was tagged, his bio indexed, his family line traced, his movements logged. Not for vengeance. For preparation. Trade with the galaxy was permitted. Limited. Carefully filtered. Earth bought very little. Sold even less. What it wanted most was data, and that it took freely. Its satellites listened. Its telescopes watched. Its AI watched the watchers. While the stars burned with war, Earth stored every byte. Every maneuver. Every mistake. The galaxy believed Earth's silence meant irrelevance. It was a mistake made by civilizations far older than humanity. They had assumed silence meant weakness. They mistook self-restraint for incapacity. And Earth, humble on the surface, boiling underneath, let them believe it. Terran diplomats, often overlooked in summits, always showed up on time, always left without argument. They recorded everything. Said nothing. Gave nothing away. Their hands never trembled, and their words never overreached. The Keldrathi interpreted this as submission. The coalition mistook it for uncertainty. It was neither. The truth is, Earth had already prepared for war centuries ago, before it even knew alien life existed. The weapons it feared others might wield were the ones it had once pointed at itself. Nuclear fire, AI extinction protocols, viral warheads, autonomous kill drones. It had walked that path. And it had recoiled. What the galaxy called modern war was, to Earth, retrograde madness. So Earth built differently. Not for conquest. For survival. It crafted stealth over spectacle, precision over presence, silence over saber-rattling. When the stars cried out for help or dominance, Earth's reply was simply the hum of machines, watching, recording, waiting. Still, among its own people, myths grew. What if the war came to Earth? What if one stray shot from a far-off battle destroyed a Terran moon station? Would Earth retaliate? Would it fold? Some said Earth was too divided internally to ever mount a unified defense. But they forgot one thing. Humans fight most viciously not when commanded, but when provoked. Earth had watched empires rise and fall. Had seen species cry freedom and then trade it for power. Had watched entire fleets vanish in artificial storms of their own making. And it stayed silent. Not out of indifference. But because, in every war fought in the stars, it saw a reflection of its own worst past. But even the most patient predator does not tolerate a bite to the throat. The galaxy didn't understand that. Not yet. And so Earth waited, not to be drawn into war, but to be justified in ending it. Not with parades. Not with pleas. But with a precision that would shake the stars. All it needed was one mistake. One fatal, arrogant, irredeemable mistake. And then, everything would change. The Keldrathi Dominion had always been arrogant, their doctrine rooted in dominance through intimidation. When their scout vessel passed the Sol exclusion zone near Saturn, it wasn't curiosity that motivated them, it was disregard. Human space was labeled neutral, not sacred. The scout, operating on loose directives and inflated pride, interpreted an array of human satellites and deep space mining systems as latent military infrastructure. No weapons, no signatures of aggression, just silent assets orbiting Titan, functioning like clockwork. The Keldrathi didn't understand restraint, so they saw deception. Protocol should have dictated observation, logging, and withdrawal. Instead, the Keldrathi commander, a minor noble with aspirations of frontline fame, ordered a demonstration. A single antimatter charge was launched, slicing silently through the void. Within seconds, Titan's orbital station, Minerva Array, was gone. 726 civilians. Scientists. Engineers. Families. No warning. No communication. Just silence. Then fire. The Keldrathi vessel transmitted a brief report, object neutralized. No hostile response. The logs were filed. The crew celebrated. And Earth received the data packet less than 4 hours later. Earth didn't send back a declaration. There was no speech. No public broadcast. Within minutes of confirmation, all Terran diplomatic channels went dark. Every trade relay shut down. A full quantum blackout. The galaxy noticed, but dismissed it as grief or internal chaos. On Earth, it was neither. It was the trigger buried beneath centuries of discipline. The Terran Security Assembly convened in a classified joint session for the first time in over 90 years. No cameras. No journalists. No leaks. One by one, departments presented. First came the loss confirmation. Then the intercept analysis. Then the proof. The Keldrathi ship had not only fired first, it had transmitted a victory log while still in Earth's declared neutral zone. No provocation. No warning. The station had been medical and scientific. Unarmed. The room remained silent as the final packet was displayed, galactic media laughing. A popular anchor from a Zentari outlet declared Earth's grief amusing. He mocked Terran silence as fear. Memes spread across the network within hours. One missile, and they curl into the ground. The Keldrathi ambassador to the coalition released a public statement implying Earth was incapable of defending its own assets. The Dominion's Central Council didn't apologize. Instead, they claimed the region was unsecured and strategically ambiguous. The word they used was collateral. Within Earth's command structure, every safeguard snapped shut. Decades of passivity turned into precision. Minerva had been considered non-strategic, but that didn't matter. Blood was spilled. Civilians. Humans. On Earth, that was enough. The military's Black Division, long dormant, was activated. Designations long considered theoretical were confirmed live. Protocol Ragnarok was authorized. Asset Omega was unfrozen. Key figures from Deep Defense were reintroduced to the chain of command, some pulled from off-world colonies where they had vanished for decades. Earth didn't move quickly. It moved efficiently. And silently. Still, the political wing pushed for restraint. A final diplomatic envoy was sent to the Keldrothi High Command. Earth wanted accountability, nothing more. They wanted the commander who launched the missile turned over. A public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Even at that late hour, Earth extended the galaxy one last chance to step back. The response arrived 2 days later. A brief, dismissive message: Dominion sovereignty cannot be questioned by a non-aligned species. You may mourn as you wish. No compensation will be issued. No signature. No title. Just text. Attached was a file, an image of the destroyed station, labeled Lesson. The galaxy saw it as just another miscommunication in a long war. But inside Earth's network, a decision had already crystallized. This was no longer about neutrality. It was about survival. Not of systems. Of principle. The Dominion had crossed the line and ensured no one else in the stars ever would again. The retaliation plans had already been in place for years. Not designed for conquest, designed for deterrence. They weren't about fleets or missiles. They were about erasure. Kinetic ghost weapons. Protocol disruption AI. Biometric war simulation injected into command infrastructure. Earth had been collecting data for decades. Every Keldrothi admiral. Every power node. Every fail-safe design. Not to attack, but to ensure if Earth ever had to strike, it would only need to do it once. Recruitment centers didn't open to the public. They didn't need to. Earth's military wasn't a standing army, it was a decentralized network of specialists, many civilian, all dormant. Upon activation, they returned to service without orders. Not because they were told. Because they understood. The death of innocents was not a strategic failure. It was a line scorched into the human soul. The war they had avoided now had a face. In less than a week, internal mobilization hit 100%. All civilian sectors remained unaware. No martial law, no press conferences. Just movement. Coordination. Unity. The protocols activated across orbital platforms, underwater arrays, off-world colonies. It wasn't just Earth that moved, it was humanity. From Mars to Europa, from orbitals around Proxima to cloaked satellites near Gliese, the species realigned overnight. In distant corners of the galaxy, the news of the destroyed station was already fading. Other species barely remembered the name of the installation. But inside Earth's networks, Minerva's personnel files played on repeat. Faces. Families. Transcripts of final transmissions. Echoes of confusion. Panic. Then silence. What the Keldrothi didn't understand was that Earth had never sought to dominate the galaxy. It didn't want territory. It didn't want tribute. It didn't even want revenge. It wanted a promise that never again would any power strike first and expect no answer. Earth had offered peace. It was refused. Now, for the first time in its interstellar existence, humanity would act not out of ambition, but duty. Not out of pride, but grief. It would not warn. It would not posture. It would not wait for permission. The galaxy had made a mistake. It thought Earth would beg. That humanity would weep, then forget. Instead, it would remember. With purpose. With fury. And it would act. No broadcasts were issued. No ultimatums. Just one final internal directive from the Terran Assembly, sent to all high-clearance terminals. 7 words. Begin silent protocol. The response has started. The moment Earth activated its silent response protocol, its political structure transformed. The Terran Assembly, once a slow-moving coalition of sovereign interests, pivoted into a unified command. No debates. No subcommittees. Authority was condensed into a war state framework designed long ago but never used. Civilian governance continued above the surface, but beneath it, operations shifted into a precise machine built for war. Earth hadn't lost its temper. It had awakened a calculus. The global communication grid rerouted through hardened layers. Civilian internet remained untouched. Beneath it, military-grade lattice relays came online. Ghost networks pulsed with pre-scripted operations, each tailored to specific scenarios. This one was classified as Type 7, unprovoked aggression resulting in civilian massacre. Every AI node associated with defense, intelligence, and logistics recalibrated within minutes. There was no chaos. There was no shouting. Just quiet acceleration. The first mobilizations were invisible. Analysts embedded in civilian sectors were quietly transferred into classified task groups. Terran behavioral prediction systems began parsing potential retaliation trajectories, not just against the Dominion, but any species that might misinterpret Earth's movement. This wasn't a counterattack, it was the shaping of a theater. Earth would not enter the war, it would redesign the battlefield before stepping on it. Across black facilities hidden beneath oceans, buried in mountains, and floating in exo-atmospheric shells, long-dormant systems activated. These weren't ships lined in hangars or battalions marching in formation. These were algorithms, swarm-based prototypes, mind-linked operatives trained to think in branches of consequence rather than tactics. Earth's military wasn't measured in soldiers. It was measured in capability density, the ratio of effect per unit deployed. And it had waited years to calibrate that density to near perfection. Humanity didn't seek vengeance through display. It sought function. The death at Minerva wasn't going to be answered by a bombardment. It was going to be balanced by structural destabilization. The goal was clear: make the Dominion incapable of repeating the act. Not through destruction. Through design failure. Task Force Zenith, deactivated after the AI insurgency 40 years prior, was quietly reauthorized. Members had gone underground, many presumed dead or absorbed into civilian life. Their activation required no recruitment. They had pre-written engagement protocols, triggered by only one phrase. When it arrived, encrypted into their personal devices, they vanished within 6 hours. Homes abandoned. Identities folded. They re-emerged within secured nodes across Mars, Luna, and deep ocean Terran bases. Parallel to Zenith, the StratNet core, Earth's predictive warframe system, was booted from cold storage. Unlike traditional AI, StratNet didn't command. It foresaw. Fed by data from every galactic war ever recorded, its simulations could predict the long-term outcome of multi-system conflicts. Within 48 hours, it presented the Assembly with a refined forecast. Limited surgical disruption of the Dominion's command lattice would cause cascading collapse in 39% of military zones. In layman's terms, remove a few critical knots, and the rope would unweave itself. The public remained unaware. No martial law. No emergency signals. Markets remained steady. News focused on diplomatic tension but offered no insight into what truly unfolded. Earth had no interest in fear. Its mission required clarity, not chaos. The soldiers and operatives preparing weren't heroes standing in the light. They were instruments, willing, exact, unflinching. At recruitment centers embedded within universities, tech firms, and quiet suburbs, private signals were sent to individuals flagged as latent assets. These were not conventional soldiers. Some were software engineers who had once helped design battlefield prediction models. Others were ex-special operations officers living quiet lives under assumed identities. They didn't return to duty because they were told to, they returned because Earth's code was simple: when struck unjustly, respond decisively. Volunteer numbers exceeded projections within a week. Most never appeared in person. They logged in through secure portals, acknowledged their readiness, and were integrated remotely. Earth didn't need warm bodies in ranks. It needed minds, tools, execution. The next generation of warfare didn't happen on front lines. It happened in silence, in code, in surgical strikes no one saw coming until it was far too late. Within the Assembly's private war briefings, emphasis was placed on the Directive 3 protocol: contain escalation, preserve civilian life, and avoid planetary-level retaliation unless absolutely necessary. Earth did not want planets turned to glass. Its revenge would not be mistaken for conquest. Its methods would echo like lessons, not scars. Industrial manufacturing adapted instantly. Civilian factories with buried auxiliary capabilities switched output. Within days, commercial drone facilities were assembling reconnaissance units, mobile encryption jammers, and surgical payloads. Everything was modular, trackless, unbranded. No Terran flags. No declarations. Humanity wasn't stepping onto the stage. It was slipping into the rafters, rewiring the lights. Earth's outer colonies, often seen as scientific outposts or self-sufficient ecosystems, began reporting increased shipments. The pretense was maintenance. In reality, they were being fortified as fallback nodes and deployment vectors. Mars became a transit relay. Europa activated defensive mines that had been dormant for 80 years. Not to defend. To isolate. Earth wouldn't let the war reach it. It would leave nothing open behind it. Perhaps the most critical change was internal. Humanity's soul, long tempered by peace, recalibrated. The shock of Minerva's destruction didn't cause panic, it caused focus. Generations that had known only prosperity understood in an instant the price of it. Those who had grown soft remembered they had teeth. And those who never forgot stood ready to lead. Earth had no anthem for what was coming. No rally cry. It issued no message to the stars. But every species listening to the Terran silence felt something shift. The lack of noise wasn't retreat. It was precision winding itself tighter. Something old, buried beneath layers of discipline and fear, had been disturbed. Humanity's restraint wasn't infinite. It was conditioned. And when that condition was broken, there would be no half measures. This was no longer about who fired first. It was about ensuring no one ever fired on Earth again. And so, beneath the stillness of a blue world orbiting a quiet star, the greatest mobilization in human history began, not with trumpets or orders, but with cold intention. Not a war of survival. A war of principle. Strategic. Relentless. Calculated to end before it ever needed to be declared. Because for Earth, this wasn't entry into the galactic war. It was the beginning of its end. A Keldrathi command cruiser vanished without a trace near the Persei Rift. It had been broadcasting standard patrol telemetry one moment, and the next, all signals ceased. No explosion, no distress signal, no debris. A Dominion salvage unit arrived 3 hours later and found only fragments. No bodies, no power core, no data logs. The exterior hull showed no signs of conventional weapons fire. The report was labeled as internal malfunction, quietly dismissed. But behind the scenes, high-level Keldrathi officers grew unsettled. The cruiser had been one of their most secure vessels. Its encryption was rated above all known breach attempts. And still, it was gone. 2 days later, the flagship of Fleet Sector 12 abruptly rerouted and entered a gravity well it had logged as unstable. The crew never corrected course. No alarms triggered. No override issued. 8,000 Dominion personnel were lost in what was termed a catastrophic navigational error. But investigation revealed an anomaly. All ship AI subroutines had been altered milliseconds before course adjustment. The alteration bore no signature. No code source. No trace. Earth's first offensive had begun, not with missiles, but with silence. It bypassed enemy ships, infiltrated data cores, turned machines into ghosts. The operations were conducted by Terran Phantom teams, units that did not wear armor or carry rifles. They operated through quantum links, neuromesh control clusters, and drone proxies. Every mission executed with total deniability. No survivors. No witnesses. Every system overwritten, scrubbed, and left unrecognizable. The Dominion couldn't even prove Earth was responsible. They only saw a pattern. Ships stopped returning. Systems stopped responding. Command structures fragmented in real time. What alarmed them more wasn't the destruction. It was the precision. Each loss was surgical. No civilian casualties. No planetary bombardments. Only military targets. Only assets connected directly to the Minerva incident. It was as if Earth's response had been mathematically plotted. Because it had. The coalition observed from a distance, disturbed by the sudden vacuum of Keldrathi assets in key zones. Their intelligence teams tried tracing the anomalies, but all probes failed. Surveillance networks flickered, satellites blinked offline. Entire surveillance arrays corrupted themselves with false telemetry loops. The coalition realized they weren't watching Earth, Earth was watching them. Rumors began to circulate across independent systems. Whispers of a black fleet that couldn't be seen. Stories of entire installations collapsing from within, systems hijacked mid-function, personnel vanishing without a sound. Keldrathi broadcasts mocked the fear, labeling it psychological warfare. But the Dominion's tone shifted. Quiet reassignments. Emergency updates to encryption protocols. Increase in AI hardening. It was too late. Earth had cracked their infrastructure years ago. Every fleet protocol. Every command hierarchy. Every biometric gate. Dominion arrogance had laid it bare, so confident no one would dare. Earth hadn't dared. It had prepared. Now that preparation unfolded like a scalpel sliding through flesh. At Cygnus Gate, a central jump relay linking 6 key Dominion sectors, a single burst of unknown code caused a cascading systems failure. Not a detonation. A redirection. Hundreds of transports rerouted, some into deep space, others into uninhabitable systems. No fleet reinforcement arrived for days. Keldrathi warlords demanded answers. The core AI was dismantled for investigation. The cause? A data fragment labeled TRN Alpha 17, traced to a buried signal, originating from a Terran listening post abandoned 50 years ago. Keldrathi command grew paranoid. Internal purges began. Officers were accused of sabotage. Entire data chains were burned in fear of infiltration. Earth didn't have to fire weapons. It simply removed their ability to trust each other. Meanwhile, Earth launched its first manned black operation. Not to destroy, but to deliver a message. A Dominion outpost on the edge of the Trakari expanse was found emptied. No alarms. No breach. Inside, scrawled across the central command wall, were 7 words in perfect Keldrathi script. We watched. We warned. You chose war. The Dominion tried suppressing the image. It failed. Within a week, the message was everywhere. The fear wasn't that Earth had struck, it was that they'd done it without being seen. No fleets. No noise. Just action. Every major Dominion system began re-evaluating defense. Not against invasion, but internal subversion. AI cores were disconnected. Manual overrides reinstated. Redundancy protocols added. It slowed everything. Delays rippled through every chain of command. The Keldrathi's greatest advantage, speed of action, was shattered. In response, Earth did nothing visible. No declarations. No fleets shown. No threats. But intelligence picked up scattered communications between Dominion warlords, urgent requests to reopen talks with the coalition. Not because they feared humanity's power, but because they didn't understand it. A civilization once mocked for being behind the curve had leapt past conventional warfare and entered a domain the rest of the galaxy hadn't imagined. Coalition diplomats, previously skeptical, began to ask their analysts, what else was Earth hiding? The question wasn't how much firepower humanity had. It was why it hadn't used it before. Earth's actions didn't show anger, they showed design. A doctrine refined over centuries: minimum force, maximum disruption, zero collateral. The legend began to take shape. They weren't being called soldiers anymore. The alien term for them was ghost steel, a word that meant invisible inevitability. The kind of enemy that couldn't be reasoned with because it wouldn't stop to explain. Entire Dominion sectors shifted patrol routes, abandoning contested systems without a shot fired. Earth wasn't just winning. It was reshaping the psychological landscape of the war. Terror by silence. Power through discipline. The galaxy now realized something terrifying. Earth had joined the war. Not with fury, but with purpose. It didn't want conquest. It wanted closure. And nothing would stand in its way until the debt of blood had been paid in full. And still, not a single human official had spoken publicly. Not one Terran face had addressed the stars. Because Earth wasn't trying to be heard. It was making sure it was remembered. The Keldrathi High Command convened in urgency as their losses began stacking in patterns they couldn't explain. Fleets weren't being destroyed in combat, they were being unraveled. Commanders were disappearing mid-transmission. Secure channels looped dead code. Warships failed to launch. The core systems they trusted had turned into liability zones. Their doctrine, built on direct confrontation and firepower dominance, had no answers for an enemy that refused to stand and fight. Earth wasn't contesting territory. It was rewriting the rules of conflict. What no one beyond Earth understood was that this was not improvisation. This was doctrine. Not one recently drafted, but forged decades ago in silence. It was called the doctrine of relentless response, and it operated on 4 principles: attack no target that doesn't strike first, reply only with asymmetric force, neutralize critical systems without fanfare, and disappear before attribution is possible. Earth had never planned to fight a war of attrition. It had designed a doctrine that ended conflicts before escalation became an option. When Terran systems struck, they did so without repetition. Every strike was unique. No tactic was used twice. No signature repeated. It became impossible to defend against them, because there was nothing to anticipate. Keldrathi analysts found no patterns, no central direction. Some suspected Earth's actions were fragmented guerrilla responses. But that was another layer of the deception. Every move was part of a synchronized framework designed by StratNet, Earth's war predictive AI, which ran thousands of simulations an hour across every known galactic front. The goal was not victory, it was finality. Dominion Fleet Command tried isolating their assets, decentralizing to avoid system-wide collapses. It failed. Earth didn't need concentration. It needed exposure. The more the Keldrathi split their forces, the easier they became to isolate and dismantle. One Dominion sector saw its planetary defense grid reversed, activated against its own orbiting fleet. Another experienced a communications blackout just hours before its largest military transfer, resulting in a collision between 2 capital-class warships. These weren't lucky breaks. They were engineered. Earth's forces didn't rely on superior numbers. They relied on anticipation, speed, and denial. Once targets were marked, data was fed into Warnode AI units capable of generating 1,000 non-redundant strike pathways in seconds. Those paths were then fed into small autonomous drones that traveled without human control. They operated on pre-simulated contingencies, capable of selecting optimal outcomes on the move. No trace. No signal. No second chance. When a Dominion listening post finally captured the fragment of an intercepted command string, it translated only a single Terran phrase: high-value response, zero-tolerance tier. The message was parsed, but the conclusion remained the same. Earth wasn't fighting the Dominion. It was dismantling it. The Keldrathi Empire attempted countermeasures. They redeployed psychic commanders trained to anticipate unpredictable behavior. Earth's response? Deploy psychological decoy nodes, mimicking human logic in wildly irrational patterns, tricking even the most refined anticipators. When Dominion bioweapon teams launched Pathfinder probes into Terran space to provoke a counteraction, they vanished. Later, those same teams received their own flight logs broadcast back to them with every weakness annotated. There was no confrontation. Just the unmistakable fact that Earth had already been inside their systems before the probes had even launched. Earth's doctrine wasn't just tactical, it was moral. It refused to engage civilians, even when enemy planets housed military command. Targets were selected with mathematical precision. Earth's ability to bypass the collateral that defined galactic warfare became its most terrifying strength. No burnt cities. No screaming broadcasts. No hostage worlds. Just elimination of capability. Humanity didn't fight like an empire. It fought like a precision tool sharpened over centuries of restraint. And when confronted with questions about Earth's long-term goals, analysts across the galaxy reached the same grim realization: Earth wasn't trying to win. It was trying to make a point so undeniable that no one would ever test it again. This wasn't retribution. It was legacy setting. Rumors emerged among surviving Keldrathi crews. Stories of weapons that didn't fire bullets or beams, but soundless data pulses that made machines forget who they were. Drones that shut down enemy armor from kilometers away, mid-battle. Neural scramblers that erased short-term memory in field officers before they could issue commands. One fleet captain reported his command console asking him a question in his own voice: "Do you understand why we responded?" Across the coalition, nervous admiration grew. Some species began openly requesting Earth's assistance, not through alliances, but through private channels. Their requests were ignored. Earth had no interest in picking sides. It had made its position clear. Attack us, and we will erase the capacity for further aggression. Not with occupation, not with scorched worlds, but with erasure of function. A war doctrine designed not for expansion, but for immunity. In military academies across the stars, cadets were forced to study Terran tactics. Not out of respect, but out of fear. Every known method of resistance was being proven obsolete. Earth didn't deploy fleets, it deployed conclusions. Meanwhile, Earth issued no updates, no demands, no ultimatums. The doctrine of relentless response wasn't a warning. It was a statement of being. A silent truth echoing louder than any fleet could shout. The Dominion's commanders, once symbols of brutality and pride, had become paranoid. Constant relocation. Double verification of orders. Systems revalidated hourly. They were no longer at war. They were waiting to be erased. Coalition officials debated openly whether Earth had become the most dangerous power in the galaxy. But inside Earth's command architecture, there was no celebration. No high fives. No declarations of supremacy. Only one directive remained active across every military interface: finish what was started, leave no ambiguity, and vanish once the lesson is complete. Humanity didn't fight to be feared. It fought to ensure it never had to fight again. And Earth was just getting started. The Dominion's internal channels were collapsing under the weight of uncertainty. What began as isolated disruptions had evolved into a persistent fear that every command, every system, every assumption might already be compromised. But Earth never confirmed anything. No spokesperson stepped forward. No soldier was captured. No device was recovered intact. Only the results remained: disabled fleets, inaccessible AI cores, severed supply lines, and an expanding vacuum where Keldrathi authority once stood unchallenged. As Earth continued its campaign of calculated silence, panic took root in the species that had once mocked it. Keldrathi outposts began issuing mandatory psychological evaluations for their officers, afraid that stress might lead to internal collapse. Morale dropped in every Dominion division. Veteran commanders requested reassignment to rear sectors. Training programs were revised to include strategies for Terran-style incursion, yet there was no real data on what that even meant. All they had were fragments, stories, and a growing legend that humans had returned to war not as a force, but as an inevitability. Alien media shifted tone quickly. What was once open ridicule became speculation laced with anxiety. Theories emerged that humans had unlocked higher forms of artificial intelligence, or that they had ascended into partial machine integration. A popular galactic host who once called Earth a quaint relic with big teeth was forced to retract on live broadcast after an incident where his station was temporarily hijacked by a Terran probe that displayed a live feed of the Minerva station's destruction, unfiltered, raw, and timed to coincide with his mockery. The message was clear: Earth hadn't forgotten, and it was still watching. Civilian populations in Dominion-controlled regions began demanding answers. If Earth could destroy fleets without ever being seen, what else could they do? Refugees from the border sectors started fleeing toward coalition worlds, terrified of becoming collateral in a war they no longer believed the Dominion could control. Earth had not attacked any civilian centers, but the precision of its actions created a psychological war more effective than any campaign of terror. No one feared destruction, they feared being rendered irrelevant. Dominion attempts to capture human operatives failed repeatedly. Their traps never sprung. Their detection systems never pinged. Intelligence networks started collapsing in on themselves, chasing shadows. It became protocol to scrub internal data drives every 12 hours. Some began to believe Earth could read messages as they were written, before they were sent. Whether it was true didn't matter. The belief alone crippled their operations. Coalition analysts tried to separate fact from rumor. The task proved impossible. One day, an unregistered object was found orbiting a coalition world, its systems inert, but emitting a low-frequency code. It took weeks to decode, only to find it was a map of every Keldrathi fleet movement from the last 60 days. The data was accurate to the second. No one claimed it. No one traced it. But everyone understood the implication. Earth could see everything. A new alien term spread across forums and military chatter: the quiet verdict. It referred to Terran strikes that left no explosion, only malfunction and silence. A ship would drift, dead in space, its systems locked in recursive loops, life support intact but all control lost. In some cases, entire crews were found alive and untouched, unable to access their ship systems, listening to their own communications looped back at them with one phrase inserted, "You were warned." Some Keldrathi soldiers began to resign en masse. Small-scale mutinies broke out. Dominion officers began to fear their own troops more than the enemy. The mythos of humanity's capability grew faster than its confirmed actions. It wasn't Earth's weaponry that terrified them. It was the restraint. Earth had the capacity to level cities, and instead, chose to remove the ability to give an order. That precision wasn't mercy. It was control. Fear bled into other species. Coalition partners that once viewed Earth as neutral now saw them as the most disciplined and dangerous civilization alive. Debates erupted in diplomatic councils. Should Earth be trusted, or should it be isolated? No one knew. Earth said nothing. It answered no calls, responded to no inquiries, gave no interviews. And that silence was interpreted as the worst possible message. Merchant guilds rerouted shipping lanes away from Terran space. Some sectors began developing protocols to avoid accidental proximity to human assets. No one wanted to provoke a strike, but no one was sure what counted as provocation anymore. Earth had made only one formal statement, their internal doctrine broadcast during the early phases, respond only when struck first. But now that response had revealed itself as absolute, the galaxy wondered what counted as a strike. In underground markets, Terran tech became priceless. Not because it was powerful, but because it was untraceable. A single stolen interface chip from a disabled Terran drone sold for the value of a cruiser. No one could reverse engineer it. Every system was rigged with logic bombs, self-scrambling code, and embedded failsafes. Even studying a fragment too long would trigger a microburst EMP or neural data lock. Earth didn't just outpace its enemies, it protected its lead with layers of clever, brutal security. Entire Dominion sectors went dark voluntarily, their local governors cutting all network connections for fear of deeper penetration. This self-isolation disrupted internal trade, coordination, and planetary stability. Earth hadn't fired a shot in weeks, yet it was winning by default. Dominion influence was imploding under the weight of paranoia and unconfirmed threats. It was psychological collapse at interstellar scale. Amid the chaos, one simple message circulated on encrypted Terran relays, intercepted only once by a Keldrathi Black Ops unit. Its source could not be traced, but it was verified as Terran. It read, "This is not escalation. This is subtraction." Even Coalition High Command now whispered in private about the new equation. Earth had altered the strategic balance without seeking territory, treaties, or recognition. The human presence in the war was more than military, it was symbolic. A brutal, silent answer to a universe that once laughed at their refusal to engage. They weren't laughing now. The Dominion attempted to restore control by consolidating its core fleets, pulling forces back from fringe sectors to protect its central systems. It was a tactic meant to project strength, but the move revealed something deeper, fear. Earth hadn't threatened their homeworlds, but the Dominion's actions made it clear they expected that to change. The withdrawals disrupted years of occupation strategy, abandoned resource nodes, and exposed vulnerable systems once considered fully secured. Allied species under Dominion rule saw the sudden absence as an opportunity. Resistance cells activated. Old alliances reignited. The Empire began to fracture from within. Earth didn't claim credit. It didn't need to. The psychological momentum shifted. The idea of Earth as a distant, neutral observer was gone. In its place stood a force that intervened without seeking acknowledgement. That kind of influence didn't need territory or fleets. It needed clarity. Earth's restraint was no longer misread as cowardice, it was recognized as control. At a diplomatic summit on Rilva's Prime, a coalition official quietly remarked, "We don't know if they're still attacking. But we do know they haven't been stopped." That statement spread faster than any proclamation. If Earth had a goal, no one knew it. If it had limits, no one could find them. What it had made clear was that it would not forget a single injustice, and it would not leave loose ends. Every Dominion ship, base, relay, or official directly tied to the Minerva attack had either gone silent or turned into a liability for their own side. There was no second strike. Earth didn't need one. The Keldrathi War Council issued new security protocols mandating daily system resets, analog backups, and the reduction of AI involvement across all military operations. This decision instantly degraded their command response time and battlefield flexibility by 34%. Earth hadn't just struck, they'd forced their enemy to devolve. In parallel, key Dominion scientists and engineers began disappearing. Some defected. Others simply vanished, never making it to their next outpost or transfer. Those who did make it back often arrived to find their research wiped clean. Backup systems were either erased or rigged to loop false datasets. In one case, a Dominion cybernetics lab reported the total loss of 5 years of experimental work, every nanosecond of progress gone without any evidence of intrusion. In the absence of visible enemy action, Dominion officers started turning on each other. Accusations of infiltration. Fear of double agents. Internal purges escalated. Earth's greatest advantage wasn't superior weaponry, it was introducing variables their enemies couldn't control or predict. They didn't need to destroy fleets when they could destroy cohesion. They didn't need to fight battles when they could collapse hierarchies. Meanwhile, Earth's actual military presence remained hidden. No armadas lined the stars. No broadcast footage leaked. The war humanity was waging didn't exist on the usual spectrum. It was fought in code, in predictive modeling, in information denial. Every action fed into StratNet, which adjusted the next sequence with mechanical comm. Earth was methodically burning down the enemy's foundations without using fire. One unexpected side effect was the fracture of Allied coordination across the Dominion. Minor species once coerced into loyalty began hesitating. Some stopped responding to Keldrothi signals. Others began transmitting diplomatic feelers toward Terran space. Earth didn't answer them. Not because it had no interest, but because acknowledging them wasn't part of the doctrine. The mission hadn't changed. It wasn't to inspire rebellion or recruit allies. It was to impose finality. As the outer sectors fell quiet, galactic commerce rerouted. Terran-designated safe corridors, once empty, saw a sharp increase in neutral merchant traffic. Not because Earth demanded it, but because even smugglers preferred the route where no warships vanished mysteriously. Earth became the unspoken pivot of safe passage. It enforced peace without patrols, dictated influence without claiming borders. No demands, no taxes, no threats, only consequence. Across Dominion-controlled media, attempts were made to spin the silence. Earth was called a coward again, accused of hiding rather than fighting. But the narrative didn't stick. Every viewer had seen the data. They'd watched entire squadrons go dark. They'd seen Dominion command centers light up for the last time, never to respond again. Propaganda failed because fear was no longer theoretical, it was functional. Earth didn't need to prove it could act. Everyone already knew it had. One coalition observer summarized it bluntly: the humans aren't fighting this war to win. They're fighting so they never have to fight again. Inside Earth, no change in governance occurred. Civilian life continued. Markets stayed stable. Cultural expression thrived. The silence from Earth's population wasn't imposed, it was chosen. The response protocol had become part of their collective will. They weren't demanding vengeance. They were enforcing a standard. And they knew exactly what that required. Reports surfaced of automated Terran systems reaching into dead sectors, not to attack, but to repair. Communications arrays once disabled by Dominion fire were restored by self-replicating Terran drones. Satellites not built for war but for surveillance, quiet, passive, constant, appeared in orbit around systems that had once fired upon Earth's allies. There were no weapons on these machines. Only eyes. Earth wasn't just removing threats. It was leaving reminders. On neutral worlds, humans walked freely, unaccompanied. No bodyguards. No escort fleets. And no one dared to approach them with hostility. Not out of reverence, but out of caution. Earth had become a psychological force. The price of striking it had become generational. The lesson was no longer Earth's alone to remember. The galaxy remembered now. And the humans had only delivered a fraction of what they were capable of. In the deepest chambers of the Keldrothi Strategic Command, a new directive emerged, not out of confidence, but out of desperation. Operation Iron Pulse was meant to reassert control through sheer force. The plan called for a full-scale demonstration of Dominion firepower against an unaligned frontier colony suspected of harboring Terran sympathies. It was intended as a warning, a final show of strength to remind the galaxy who still wielded the bigger guns. But the order never reached its fleet. It was intercepted, overwritten, and rerouted. The original target received humanitarian supplies instead, dropped by drones bearing Dominion credentials. No Dominion officer authorized it. Earth did. When Dominion analysts traced the breach, they realized it had been planned weeks in advance. Their own operation had been allowed to develop, observed, and then inverted at the last moment. The entire chain of command had been manipulated like a puppet show. Dominion pride fractured in that instant. They hadn't just lost control of their fleets. They had lost control of the story. Earth was now writing it. The finality of Earth's design became undeniable when the Keldrathi Prime Strategic Data Core, the single most protected digital vault in their empire, was found compromised. Not corrupted. Not erased. Modified. The breach had left no trace of external access. All biometric locks remained untouched. But the content inside had been subtly altered, fleet orders were scrambled, historical logs amended, political directives subtly rewritten. No one knew how long the changes had been present. For all they knew, Earth had been inside for years. The psychological toll escalated beyond containment. Commanders refused to issue orders without full-spectrum verification, which often delayed action to the point of irrelevance. Combat responses lagged. Ships deployed with half-crews. Paranoia infected every process. In the absence of enemy fleets, the Dominion's greatest threat had become its own uncertainty. And Earth never offered a correction. It never claimed responsibility. It never offered terms. In some sectors, entire Keldrathi units surrendered to third-party observers preemptively, convinced they had already been compromised. One outer garrison broadcast a formal apology to Earth and then destroyed its own weapons stockpile before evacuating. There had been no contact from any Terran source. It was pure psychological submission. Within the coalition, opinion began to shift further. Quiet diplomatic inquiries arrived at Earth's periphery, not seeking alliances, but offering acknowledgments. These weren't peace offerings. They were respect tokens, subtle nods to a power that had demonstrated mastery without ever demanding it. Earth ignored them. Not out of arrogance, but discipline. It wasn't building influence. It was enforcing boundaries. When Earth responded to aggression, it didn't seek validation. It simply ensured it would never be necessary again. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the civilian sector remained untouched by war. There were no visible militarization efforts. No public speeches. No calls to arms. The people of Earth didn't cheer, didn't riot, didn't protest. They understood what was unfolding and why. Their silence wasn't fear. It was collective intent. They knew the cost of violence. They also knew the cost of doing nothing. And the lesson of Minerva had forged that resolve in absolute terms. The galaxy watched for escalation. It didn't come. Earth didn't press for territory. It didn't punish neutral factions. It didn't gloat. Every enemy facility targeted had direct ties to the Minerva incident. Once those targets were eliminated or rendered inert, the strikes ceased. Earth's silence resumed, not as a retreat, but as a conclusion. The war for Earth was over. Its conditions had been met. Its point had been made. But the Dominion couldn't recover. The infrastructure they lost wasn't just hardware, it was cohesion. Doctrines built on dominance couldn't operate in an environment where response couldn't be predicted, where escalation invited not more conflict, but strategic disassembly. The moment they fired on Earth, they had introduced a variable they couldn't model, consequence without negotiation. No second chances. No round tables. Just immediate subtraction. By the time Dominion High Command accepted this, the fractures were irreversible. Sectors defected. Officers resigned. Entire planets declared neutrality. Keldrathi influence collapsed inward like a dying star. And Earth hadn't issued a single demand. It had simply demonstrated that for every action, there was a response, and that response didn't have to scream to be heard. A final encrypted message, later intercepted on a dead relay in a former Dominion command zone, carried no origin signature. It simply read, "Let this be the end of it." The Coalition Council, which once viewed Earth as a passive observer, now recognized it as a strategic apex actor. Not a superpower in the traditional sense, but but something far more dangerous, an entity capable of complete, irreversible, and precisely measured retaliation. The term Terran Standard emerged in military doctrine. It described not a method of war, but a minimum threshold for provoking Earth. One that no one wanted to cross again. Military academies began restructuring war simulations. Earth was no longer a potential ally or hypothetical enemy. It became the variable that ended conflicts by refusing to participate in them as expected. A civilization that fought not to win, but to define the cost of injustice. And still, Earth said nothing. It didn't need to. In the aftermath of the Dominion's collapse, silence swept across the stars like an aftershock. Entire sectors once under tight control now floated leaderless. Local authorities scrambled to organize governance, while former military installations stood abandoned, intact but untouched. Earth didn't claim them. It didn't move in. It didn't speak. That silence became the sharpest edge in its arsenal. Where others would have conquered, Earth simply walked away, leaving power without ownership. It wasn't disinterest, it was policy. Earth never fought to expand. It fought to end a single insult. That goal had been achieved with surgical finality. Civilizations across the coalition recalibrated. Without official treaties, new doctrines were passed in whispers and code. Don't provoke Terrans. Don't assume restraint means weakness. Don't mistake silence for absence. Old rivalries softened. Border disputes paused. Patrols were rerouted away from any vector that might lead to a Terran system. The galaxy wasn't unified, but for the first time in centuries, it was aligned in caution. Earth's victory hadn't just defeated a power. It rewired the logic of conflict itself. A strange reverence developed in cultural corners. Not admiration, respect mixed with distance. Humans weren't celebrated. They were recorded, chronicled, studied. Museums started displaying simulation modules based on Earth's response doctrine. Military analysts built models of Terran psychological operations, trying to decipher how much had been pre-planned and how much had been reactive. No one could agree. The beauty of Earth's method was that it left no trail, only outcomes. Every trace was deliberate. Every absence was part of the architecture. On once occupied worlds, Dominion flags were taken down not by rebels, but by silence. There was no one left to enforce them. Earth had removed not the soldiers, but the systems they relied on. Entire command webs were rendered obsolete. Without communications, without orders, without trust in their own infrastructure, Dominion loyalists simply dissolved. It was the first time in known history that an empire fell without a single major battle on its home soil. Earth hadn't waged war. It had erased the conditions that allowed war to exist in the first place. In high-level coalition meetings, the question turned inward. If Earth was capable of this response after one provocation, what were they capable of if truly threatened? The idea of attacking Earth again became unthinkable. Not because of fear alone, but because of certainty. The cost was now known. And knowing was enough. New trade channels opened through neutral intermediaries. No diplomats. No official Terran representatives. Only autonomous shipping corridors and encrypted contracts. Earth refused to lead or dictate. It simply re-entered the flow of interstellar exchange, not as a victor, but as a presence. It neither demanded tribute nor celebrated achievement. Its existence alone changed every negotiation table. Any deal, any treaty, any pact now had to consider what Earth would do, without Earth needing to be present. Independent systems flourished in the power vacuum. Many had once feared Dominion retaliation if they declared sovereignty. That fear evaporated. Not because of Earth's support, but because of the impossibility of Dominion resurgence. Every attempt at regrouping fell apart. Automated Terran drones would appear near regrouping zones, silent and still. They never attacked. They didn't need to. The message was received. You're not rebuilding the past. You're living in the world Earth just taught you to fear. In broadcast networks, the phrase Terran equation gained cultural traction. It represented the moment in any scenario where escalation resulted in permanent consequence. It was no longer theoretical. It had become history. Artists, poets, and strategists used it to describe absolute turning points. Earth didn't just alter the military landscape, it altered the language. They had fought without propaganda, without narration, yet still authored the dominant myth of the age. Children on distant worlds now studied Terran history as a required subject. Their textbooks no longer described humans as primitive or peripheral. They outlined the development of Earth's doctrine with careful neutrality. The collapse of the Dominion was no longer attributed to military inferiority. It was documented as a failure to understand what Earth had become. Humanity had transitioned from reactive power to philosophical consequence. It didn't just destroy a fleet. It demonstrated what awaited those who ignored restraint. Meanwhile, Earth's internal systems never shifted into empire building. Their infrastructure returned to civilian priorities. Research resumed. Culture blossomed. Not in pride, but in relief. They had proven they could act. They no longer needed to prove it again. No statues were raised. No parades marched. The operatives who had acted vanished back into silence. No names were released. No medals awarded. The mission had never been about glory. It had been about ensuring that humanity would never again suffer the mistake of thinking diplomacy alone guaranteed respect. Across former Dominion space, abandoned data centers still bore the remnants of Terran infiltration, modified protocols, inert AI cores, silent watch programs that never activated again. Earth had built systems that unraveled only once. Afterward, they simply watched. The message was implicit. Repeat your mistake, and we will repeat the answer. Coalition leadership, for all its wealth and tradition, realized it had been caught studying the wrong things. Power was no longer determined by how loudly a civilization broadcast its strength. It was measured in what others stopped doing after you acted. Earth had not conquered worlds. It had rewritten caution. The war was over. Earth never said a word. A transmission echoed through the stars, short and final. It didn't come from Earth, but from the edge of known space, an old Terran relay once deemed obsolete. The message contained no threats, no directives. It was a single sentence, encoded in every major galactic language. We do not forget, we do not repeat, we do not return. The meaning was clear to those who had paid attention. Earth was not seeking to occupy, retaliate, or expand. It had concluded its response. The slate was clean. The lesson had been delivered. Whether anyone learned from it was not Earth's concern. Across fractured Dominion space, the remnants of once absolute power scattered. Former commanders became wanderers, hiding their ranks, altering appearances. No safe harbors remained. Keldrathi outposts refused them access. Coalition sectors denied them entry. They were not seen as survivors, but as liabilities. Earth hadn't pursued them. Earth had made them irrelevant. Their authority was void. The empires they served had become ghost states. What remained of their fleets drifted directionless, stripped of trust and purpose. New governments emerged in the ruins, cautious and localized. There were no declarations of dominance. No one dared speak in absolutes. The concept of power had changed. Rulers were no longer judged by how much they controlled, but how much attention they could avoid from powers that didn't need to show themselves. Quiet governance became the new stability. Open conflict became strategic suicide. Earth had forged this new logic through action, not ideology. No manifestos. No conquest. Just deliberate calibration of consequence. On neutral worlds, markets flourished. Trade resumed at scales not seen in decades. The absence of war brought opportunity, but beneath that resurgence lingered a caution shaped by Earth's silent precision. Even pirate factions adapted. Raiding in Terran-adjacent sectors became taboo. Smugglers blacklisted routes near Earth-aligned systems. Even lawless zones adopted the Terran doctrine in whispers: only strike what strikes first, and never escalate without accounting for the invisible. Culturally, Earth became the focal point of an unspoken reverence. Not worship, not fear, something else. A universal recognition of a civilization that had once been mocked, dismissed, measured by outdated assumptions, and yet risen to demonstrate the cost of miscalculation. Artists began composing works not about Terran victories, but about restraint. About the power of the held-back fist. Songs, murals, and holographic installations captured the moment a single act of overconfidence shattered an empire, and how that response had reshaped the stars. Within Earth, no monuments stood. The operatives who had enacted its will were never revealed. Their actions folded back into anonymity. There were no biographies, no awards, no heroic tales. Their stories remained untold by design. Earth had always fought for something greater than revenge. It fought to establish boundaries in a galaxy that had forgotten what restraint meant. And having done so, it faded back into the rhythm of its own people. Children were taught the doctrine of relentless response not as military theory, but as civic principle. A reminder that deterrence was not built on domination, but clarity. That peace wasn't granted by treaties, but earned through unwavering resolve. That silence, when chosen, was louder than a fleet's engines. Earth's doctrine became less about war and more about permanence. When pushed beyond diplomacy, it did not ask for understanding, it ensured it. The coalition assembled a commemorative council to officially mark the end of the Dominion War. Invitations were sent to every known power. Earth did not respond. Its seat remained empty, untouched, and unclaimed. That absence echoed louder than any speech. Even in non-attendance, Earth led the conversation. The Council passed unanimous resolutions restricting AI warfare, reinforcing first strike prohibitions, and establishing permanent observation of interstellar command structures, all based on Earth's model. Not because Earth demanded it, but because the galaxy understood what happened when it failed to respect such thresholds. Former enemy species recalibrated cultural narratives. The word human no longer carried assumptions of fragility or emotional volatility. It now meant surgical decisiveness. Terran silence replaced Terran diplomacy as the defining trait. In every simulator, wargame, and prediction engine, Earth was classified not as an empire or a threat, but as a conditional force, invisible until provoked, unstoppable once awakened, gone once the message had been delivered. And the message had been delivered. On an outpost in the Zuri's belt, a retired Keldrathi officer stared at the remains of his fleet through a cracked observation dome. He whispered a phrase that would later become common in military academies across the stars. Earth does not raise its voice, it simply ends the conversation. No further Dominion campaigns ever formed. No vengeance efforts were planned. Those who still dreamed of retribution spoke only in private, and even then, only in theory. Because they understood something that could not be forgotten, Earth would never start a war. But it would finish one completely, without warning, without remorse, and without leaving behind a reason to ever try again. The galaxy didn't fear Terran strength. It feared Terran precision. It feared what happened when a species with the capacity to burn everything chose instead to remove only what was necessary, leaving everything else intact, so that the lesson would remain visible, permanent, and inescapable. The war that Earth never wanted was over. And Earth had already moved on.